Are we live? What's going on? I don't know. Oh my God. Here it is. Here it is. I'm live. I'm in person. Good times. Okay, so as usual, I am late. It's 4:04. If you were hoping to tune in, um, if you did get to tune in, please say hi so I know you're here. And if you are watching on the replay, please put hashtag replay or hashtag team replay in the comments, just so I kind of get a little bit of a feeling for who watched this and who's kind of on the same page with me. So, hello. How are you this afternoon? I have been filming this afternoon for my my Build a Butt adventure program. So it's been kind of a sweaty day recording things outside. So I'm hoping you can just appreciate my natural sweaty glow. This topic that I'm going to talk to you guys about today is one that is very near and dear to my heart. I was really thrilled when so many people in the poll said they wanted to hear about self-love practices. Hello, hi Janine, how are you? Thank you for being here. Um, I'm going to weave together today a bunch of different concepts. Oh, and also Janine, if you're watching, can you give me just a thumbs up to let me know that you can hear me okay, that the audio is okay? So this topic that I want to talk about today brings together a bunch of different themes that I have been thinking about and working with myself for years and years. Sweaty Emma is the best, Emma. Thanks, Ms. Thank you for tuning in, lady. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Oh, Ms., this topic today is really one that you're going to love, and I actually have learned a thing or two from you about this topic. So let's see here. As usual, I made myself some notes because you know how I roll. If I don't have notes, we're just off the rails with me joking around with you and giggling and generally acting the fool. So here are my notes. So earlier this week, I asked in all the feels about what the difference was between pleasure and joy. And part of why I asked that is because we've had a couple of conversations kind of about that in the Facebook group. We talked about, like, one of the things that I told you guys is when I started the group, anybody that comes into the group has the opportunity to answer these questions. And one of the questions I ask people is, well, what's an experience that you wish you had more of? And people will frequently respond with joy. And we've talked a little bit about how I would love for us to get a little bit more clarity about what we actually mean by joy, because it's such a big concept. And then I realized from some of the comments that I was receiving in the group, that this idea of joy actually dovetails quite nicely with this other set of principles that I have been working with for a couple of years now, based on some coaching that I got from a very dear friend of mine that I'm going to explain about a little bit further on in this conversation. So first things first. So then I put in the Facebook group, I asked the question this week, what is the difference between pleasure and joy? Thanks, Janine. What is the difference between pleasure and joy? And the answers came in, and it was fascinating. And I feel there were a few threads in people's responses. People definitely had ideas about it. Some people had ideas about it that they'd clearly been thinking about for a long time. And some of us had ideas where, I don't know whether you'd been thinking about it for a long time, but you certainly had a perspective about it. So, what is the difference between pleasure and joy? And there were several sort of themes that I saw running through the responses to that. One of the things that came out, one of the things that sort of emerged in a couple of different people's responses is that pleasure is more corporeal than joy. Pleasure has more to do with the body than joy. And that is something that I sort of agree with. There is this undertone with pleasure. There is this implication that it has more to do with your body. It's of the senses, it's visceral, it's physical, right? One example Tiffany gave, she talked about chocolate cake, right? Pleasure seems like it has more to do with your body than joy does. And so almost just by virtue of being sort of an opposite. I mean, the nature of the question kind of sets it up as if these two things are opposites, right? And I'm going to talk about how that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. But isn't there this feeling with joy, and didn't this sort of theme come through in the comments about joy? Joy has more aspects to it that feel spiritual, even if it's not explicitly spiritual. Sweaty Emma is a celebrity in my brain. Joy has more aspects to it that feels spiritual, even if it's not explicit, right? Like even in the comments, nobody said joy is a spiritual state. Nobody said that. Although, of course, if you think about how medieval Christian thinkers thought about their faith, a sort of like religious ecstasy or joy was a part of their conception of their practice, or a part of the cosmos of Christian ideas about faith, right? So there's a little bit of this feeling that joy is more spiritual than pleasure, right? And you see that in the comments in that thread that we all shared together, when people are saying stuff, for example, that pleasure is more transitory, whereas joy is not. And a few people said things about how joy is a state of mind, or it comes from within, or it is like related to the soul, right? So even though it's not necessarily explicit that joy is a spiritual state, there's all of these spiritual resonances to the idea of joy, in the same way that there is this physical resonance to the idea of pleasure, right? And then isn't there also this thing about the word pleasure, where it's like related to sexuality, right? And that makes that's cool for some of us, and for others of us that's complicated, or it makes us a little bit uncomfortable. Like, I don't know, if I went to pleasure.com right now, I don't know what I would find. That, like, I didn't check it out before this, but I'm guessing it's a porn site, right? So pleasure also has this sort of illicit quality to it, right? It's of the body, it's a little bit illicit, it's sort of maybe pertains to sex in certain situations. There's this sort of thing about pleasure that it's maybe it's a little bit off-piste, it's a little bit off the beaten track, it's a little bit outside the boundaries of I don't know what, say, good girls do? Good girls? Yes? Okay, on to the next note. So really, even though I asked the question in this very either or dichotomy sort of way, pleasure and joy do not have to be opposites, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be an either or thing where we're into joy and we're not into pleasure. But I do think that there are cultural biases against pleasure that end up working against oppressed people around the planet, and particularly in our American culture, right? And by oppressed people, I'm talking about women, Black people, gay people, trans people, differently abled people, right? Hey, Jill, don't worry, I was late too. I do think that there are these cultural biases against pleasure that end up that probably come from and end up supporting patriarchy, white supremacy, heteronormativity, right? So it's not an either or with pleasure and joy, but I do think that pleasure gets kind of a bad rap, and I want to feel that out a little bit. I also just want to pause here and highlight what Kelly Landrigan said in that thread, which I thought was so beautiful. She said, there is a brightness to joy that pleasure might not have, but pleasure has a depth that joy does not encompass. I thought that was very beautiful. So it's not an either or thing, but certainly they all have they both have their place. So let's talk a little bit about pleasure. So another topic that came up in the Facebook group, yeah, Kelly, about the biases, I agree with you 100%. Another topic that's sort of, I don't remember where it was, what thread it was in, but in one of the threads over the last couple of weeks since I started the group, somebody mentioned the 7 deadly sins. And I thought that was fascinating. And like, they posted them, they said what they were. And I haven't thought about the 7 deadly sins. I don't know if I ever really learned them. I know some people, it's like, it's actually a part of their faith, right? Obviously, the seven deadly sins, they emerged out of the Christian tradition. But I'm guessing that even if you're practicing Christian right now, that the seven deadly sins are probably not an important part of your conscious mental architecture, right? You're not going around every day looking for sins. I mean, maybe you are, and if you are, this Facebook group and my rap might not be the thing for you, because I'm generally kind of pro sin. Um, but generally, I don't think any of us necessarily feel like the seven deadly sins are a conscious part of what we think about during the day. They're not something that's front and foremost in our conceptions of ourselves, or the way that we view the world, or the way that we want to view ourselves, right? That being said, even if those archetypal sins are not a conscious part of your mental architecture, everyone's heard of them. Everyone, like most people can name a few, can name more than one, right? And certainly this idea of sinfulness and these particular seven deadly sins are a cultural pattern, a cultural way of thinking, a kind of a cultural lens that has endured for centuries, right? I actually looked it up, and the list of the seven deadly sins, it's was an outgrowth of a 5th century Christian sect. I think they were Greek, and they were really focused on practices that involved going out into the desert and living a very austere, ascetic kind of a lifestyle, right? Which is kind of a signpost for you right there. So we're going to talk about the sins. We're going to go through the sins one by one, but the question that I want you to contemplate when you're thinking about this list of sins is, how are the forces of oppression in this world, which, depending on your identity, are arrayed against you in a greater or a lesser way, right? If you are, as a white lady, I experience sexist oppression, but I do not experience the oppression of racism. I do not experience the oppression of heteronormativity. I do not experience the oppression of ableism, right? Not in any physical sense, although I do have some hidden issues with that. How are these big forces of oppression in the world around us benefiting from you thinking that these things are sins? Even in this sort of subconscious, less aware sort of a way. Oh, Ms. James just added this thing, which I freaking love. Add fat people to the list of people who are oppressed, especially with regard to pleasure. Absolutely. And I just want to highlight here, because a lot of people don't know that fat, it's usually used as a term of, as like an insult or an offensive term in our culture. But when fat activists describe themselves, and body positive activists describe themselves, they use the word fat. They embrace the word fat. It's not a bad thing to be fat. Some people are fat, some people are thin, right? And absolutely, fat people are oppressed with regard to pleasure in our culture. Okay, so again, I'm just going to come back to this question that I want you to contemplate, which is, how are these big oppressive forces benefiting from you thinking that these things are sinful? And I just want to emphasize here too, before I go on, that this inquiry is not necessarily about the orthodox religious perspective on these sins, right? It's more about our popular understanding of these things, and how that popular understanding of these traits or actions as sinful is living in our heads rent-free, and we're not even really aware of it, right? Okay, so here they are. Here are the sins. Here are the sins, my friends. Okay, here's one. Sloth. Sloth. They control behaviors. Oh my God, it's like, if I could have picked 2 people to show up in the comments of this discussion, it would have been Kelly and Ms. So funny. Okay, so sloth. Sloth is about, I don't know, laziness, right? Don't be slothful. Don't be lazy. Work harder. What's a big oppressive force that wants people to work more? What's a big oppressive force that controls our lives, that lifts up a very teeny tiny number of people who who all look the same and all have the same genitals, right? What's an enormous oppressive force that wants us to think that resting is bad? I don't see it in the comments yet, but I'm just going to give you the spoiler. It's capitalism. Capitalism. Yeah, there's a lot of forces out there in this world that want you to think that rest is a bad thing, that want you to think that you could never possibly work hard enough, who want you to think that hard work, that the only way to get ahead is hard work. And if you're not successful, it's because you didn't work hard enough. It's because you were too slothful. Yeah, there we go. Here it comes in the comments. Capitalism. Yeah, okay. So that's sloth. That's one of the deadly sins, okay? Bear in mind, again, I'm not talking about this from an orthodox, religious, philosophical point of view. I'm talking about it from the popular conception point of view, the programming that gets into our minds and hangs out there so that when you're spending an afternoon after working your ass off all week, raising your kids and handling your job and handling the groceries and managing your household, you spend an hour on the couch looking at your phone and you feel like you're a bad person because you were being slothful, and maybe you didn't use the word slothful, and maybe you didn't use the word lazy, and maybe you didn't even consciously articulate the thought with words, but there is this thing inside you that when you try to slow down and work less and rest, there's this thing inside you, this cultural voice or messaging that tells you that rest is bad, okay? Here's another one of the deadly sins. Lust. Lust. Okay, so like, on the one hand, it may be like, well, our society is obsessed with sex. It's everywhere. People get to be lustful. There's no cultural obstacles to being as sexual as you want, right? Maybe I find it hard to believe that anybody would actually think that, but maybe people do think that, right? So the question I have for you is this about lust: are men punished in the same way for lust as women? Right? Our culture has all kinds of issues with sex, right? And generally, certain people get punished more for expressing their sexuality than other people, right? Women in particular are punished for taking empowered control of their sexuality, right? Gay people are not even allowed to have their sexuality, right? Yes. Kelly says, the white man's lust is so celebrated, it is normalized. Yes. Ms. says she was just typing that women are not allowed to be lustful. Women not allowed to be lustful. Fat people not allowed to be lustful. If you're a person with a wheelchair, right? There's really not a lot of porn out there showing people in wheelchairs. Just in general, our culture celebrates masculine lust, or gives the wink to masculine lust, and other people are not allowed to feel lustful. Yes. So that's lust. Next on the topic. Next sin. Bring out the next one. Okay, this is a favorite of mine. Gluttony. Gluttony. Here I just have brackets, diet culture. Yeah, okay. So like, do you think this culture wants you to be fat? Is it okay to be fat in our culture? No. In fact, what this culture really likes for you to do, especially if you're a woman, is to be very, very obsessed with how fat you are or thin you aren't, and spend a lot of your time obsessing over trying to get thinner. Yes? So if you've never heard the word diet culture before, give it a Google. I'm so excited for you because you're going to learn something about our wider culture that is really seriously going to help you. Janice just came on and posted boo. Just boo. Yeah, so diet culture is this enormous cultural institution, and it's tied up with beauty culture as well, right? That spends an enormous amount of time and resources telling women in particular that they're too freaking fat, that there's no way for them to be thin enough. And there is all of this enormous oppression and oppression against fat people, people of size. Yes. Orthorexia. Kelly, remind me of what that is. Orthorexia, the most perfect dieting, she says. Jill Wenzel says, I proudly refer to my vacation down the shore as 2 weeks of sloth and gluttony. Absolutely. Janice points out that all this culture does is create an environment to keep us fat. Well, the thing is, it's not it's not a bad thing to be fat, right? Some people are fat, some people are thin. That's the thing. All bodies are beautiful. So that's diet culture. Diet culture, which is so pervasive in all of our minds and hearts, does not want you to ever eat a cupcake or enjoy a Twinkie. So that's gluttony. That's sin. Again, the question is, what system of oppression is benefiting from me thinking this thing is sinful, right? Kelly's back to say that orthorexia is an obsession with perfect, clean food, perfect timing of eating, etc. Yeah, and I will say, Kelly, I was never a dieter particularly. Like, I know that some of you probably who are watching this right now have dieted for practically your entire lives. Like, when you really start delving into people's stories about their relationships to dieting and their weight, which has been an interest of mine for the last couple of years, man, people start their kids on diets as young as like 10. Or even younger. Like, even younger people are telling their kids they're fat, or they're having conversations with their children about how they're too fat, or they're sending them to fat camp, right? Or this is another thing that I didn't really realize myself, but when you're having a bunch of conversations in the hearing of children about your weight and your diet, even though you might not be telling the kid that they're fat, you're displaying your allegiance to a set of values that say that the number on the scale is more important than who you are as a person, right? So myself personally, I was not I didn't go on a diet when I was a kid. I tried a couple as an adult that really did not work out well, which is how I got into this kind of thing. But one of the things that I did was I was on the paleo diet for a really, really long time, and I was not really aware of it, but I definitely really restricted my dietary choices based on wanting to adhere to that set of food rules. Yeah, so there's all kinds of sneaky ways in which diet culture tells us not to be gluttonous. That's a whole other kettle of fish, right? On to the next sin. Let's talk about wrath. Wrath. Do systems of oppression want us to be angry? When you think about the people who were protesting in the streets over the last couple of months about the murder of George Floyd and the general pattern of murderous white supremacy in this country, did the authorities, the people in charge, were they in favor of the anger of the people who are brave enough to take it to the streets? No, oppressive forces don't want you to be mad. They're invested in you not being mad. Don't get mad, be nice. Sinful to get mad. On to the next sin, greed. Who gets to be greedy in our culture? Who gets to have money? Who gets to have money? And yeah, right, Ms. Like, I love this conversation. Yeah, me too. Who gets to have money? And oh my God, my husband is making chili downstairs, and the way he does it is he dry fries these peppers, and literally I am like coughing because of all this pepper shit in the air right now. Okay. Who gets to be greedy in our culture? Do systems of oppression want you to want money? No. Systems of oppression want you to not want money. Women don't want money. You shouldn't want money, right? Black people shouldn't want money. Yeah. What white supremacist heteronormative patriarchy wants to have happen is for all of the groups who are oppressed to not want shit, especially to not want money. I don't think that money is the most important thing in life, but in a lot of cases, money is the difference between living a long and healthy life and living a short and uncomfortable life. Money is the difference between being able to get the health care that you need, right? So there are a lot of big oppressive systems in this country and in our culture that actively want you to think that wanting more money is greedy. Yeah. Kelly was saying, I was told as a girl, money doesn't matter. Uh, Newsflash, it totally freaking matters. Uh-oh, spoiler, turns out it does matter. Yeah. Okay, on to the next sin. How about pride? Does patriarchy want you to feel proud of yourself? Does patriarchy want you to feel proud, freaking peppers, of your fat body? Does white supremacy want you to feel proud of your beautiful brown skin? Does a heteronormative culture want you to feel proud of you and your husband, if you're a man? Right? Does transphobic culture want you to be proud of your trans body? Right? Yeah. Kelly was waiting for this one. She says, pride, men get to manspread and be loud, right? They're allowed to take pride in themselves, right? I mean, maybe you know this meme, God grant me the confidence of a mediocre white man, right? It's not that it's that mediocre white men, or I don't know, maybe they shouldn't, but it's not that mediocre white men should think less of themselves, right? If you're a white guy, you should think just as well of yourself as any other person, right? While acknowledging your privilege. It's that everybody else is enculturated to feel shitty about themselves, right? To not take any pride in themselves. Yes. Kelly points out women and people of color do not get to inhabit verbal and physical space. Totes my goats. Okay. And then let's look at this last sin, okay? Envy. All right. So the way that I tend to frame this and think about it is that envy is just about wanting shit. Envy is about seeing stuff that other people have or ways that other people are and longing for that for yourself. Do you think that the forces in this country or in this culture that have gobbled up all the resources want you to look at the stuff that they have and feel envious about it? Nope, they don't. They want you to have this inner sense that to look at another person, to look at what they have or how they are, and have a longing to have that or be like that, to have that longing be something that's sinful, that plays right into this sort of big culture of this big cultural system of oppression. Yeah. So that's the 7 deadly sins, right? From my perspective. And again, even though it's not like we're all walking around with those 7 deadly sins emblazoned on our foreheads, right? Even I was raised in a nominally Episcopalian home. Nobody was talking to me really about sin. Maybe my father would occasionally quote a Bible verse to me, but generally nobody in my household was talking to me about sin. But do I know what it's like to live in a society that thinks that it's bad if I rest? Yeah. I totally know what it's like to monitor what I'm putting in my mouth because I think that my physical hunger for food is too much. I totally know what it's like to feel ashamed of my sexual drives. I totally know what it's like to feel like being angry is a bad thing or a wrong thing. Believe me, these forces do not want you to be angry. Anyway, those are the 7 deadly sins. So, pivoting now to something perhaps more jolly, all this is background for what I want to talk to you guys about my favorite self-love practice. My favorite self-love practice is treats. Treats. My favorite self-love practice is treats. So treating myself is a concept that I learned from my dear friend who also happens to be a life coach, Natalie Miller. She is an amazing, amazing coach. You should rush right over to her website and learn more about her, NatalieMiller.com, NatalieKMiller.com. I think that's what it is. She is awesome. And she got this philosophy of treats from a writer named Gretchen Rubin. Gretchen coined this amazing phrase, or had this amazing insight, which is, if I'm going to ask more of myself, I need to give more to myself. If I'm going to ask more of myself, I need to give more to myself. Kelly just writes here in the comments, ambition is another current sin of pride. Yes, another way that thinking of pride as sinful shows up in contemporary culture is this thing where ambition is bad. You shouldn't want things. I love this. So Leslie says, the deadly sins are bad when we prevent others from having their share of the best things in life. Love that. Ms. J says, the secret to a happy life is continual small treats. And I think that's a direct quote from Gretchen. Right, Ms.? Yeah, treats. Freaking treats. So Gretchen, as far as I know, Gretchen's original conception of the idea of treats was that a treat couldn't be something related to food or drink. And I think also there was this thing where it couldn't be something that cost a lot of money. I think that was Gretchen's original way of thinking about treats. And what Natalie has done, Natalie has evolved, has taken this idea that she learned from Gretchen and evolved it into this much more elaborate worldview about treats that acknowledges the way that white supremacist heteronormative patriarchy specifically seeks to make treats and pleasures unavailable to oppressed people. Yeah, white supremacist heteronormative patriarchy, that's a mouthful, specifically seeks to make treats and pleasures unavailable to oppressed people. Yes. It does this in a material sense by denying people resources. Yeah. And culturally it does this by getting into your head through concepts like the 7 deadly sins and making you think that you shouldn't even want what you want, or you don't deserve what you want, or that even wanting itself, desire, is problematic and possibly sinful. If you want to ask more of yourself, and certainly this pandemic is asking way, way more of most of us than regular life was pre-pandemic. If you want to ask more of yourself, try giving more to yourself. So it can be a useful practice to start with the idea of treats as being things that are not necessarily associated with food and not necessarily super expensive. Right? I think it's really useful to start from that point of view, as Gretchen does, because it can just help you think in a more expansive, broad way. I can't even believe I'm able to talk to you guys right now. The red hot pepper in the air right now in my house is so thick. It can help you expand your view of things, because it's true that food can be a treat and buying yourself a treat can be a great thing, and we're going to talk about that in just a second, but it's really helpful to start by saying, okay, what are treats I can give myself that are either super inexpensive or that don't relate to food or drink? So I'm going to start naming some, and I'm going to invite you guys that are listening. Thank you, Janice. I'm thrilled you like that. Yes, Janine. I'm going to invite you guys to put some of your ideas into the chat, okay? Here's some of my ideas. A hot bath. A hot bath is a great treat. Or even a shower. Yeah, when I feel like shit, a shower just feels wonderful. A cool shower on a really hot day. Another treat that I love to give myself is to go outside with a hose and water the garden. And I'll water the garden, kind of water myself a little bit. And if the dog's out there, I water the dog. Yes. Okay. Love it. Leslie says naps. Yeah. Naps are a great treat. But if you have this internalized idea that you're not even really conscious of, that naps are lazy, then you're like depriving yourself of this treat. It wouldn't occur to yourself to allow yourself to have a nap. Ms. Ms. James says plants. Yes. Spending time with plants. Apparently there's some kind of chemical thing that plants are putting out into the world around them that releases endorphins in human beings. I'm going to have to find the source for that. I read about it in a book a couple of days ago. Oh, Pam. Pam's on. Hey, Pam. Pam says a long walk. Absolutely. Or a short one, right? That's what's so amazing about going for a little stroll. I work from home a lot. And sometimes if I have 5 minutes before the next call that I have to be on, I will go outside and just walk back and forth in front of my house for 5 minutes. It's amazing. Bubble bath, says Janine. Yes, love a bubble bath. Marguerite. Hi, Marguerite. Marguerite says a new book. 100%. Oh my God, a new book. That's a treat for me too. Yes. Kelly says, I'm all about wearing the neon clothes and shoes that all the cool kids wear every day now. So instead of like her garments being probably something like this, Kelly arrays herself in bright colors, right? Because that's a treat for her. She wears it every day. Neon, beautiful garments, right? Clothes can be such a treat. Like another thing that patriarchy tries to do to us is make us think that traditionally female associated interests like clothing and makeup are somehow lesser or not important, right? Or food, right? There's that crazy thing where nobody appreciates mom where she's making, I don't know, 20 meals a week, but a male top chef does it in a restaurant and it's somehow amazing, right? Jill says curling up with my cat. Yeah, Jill, one of the things on my list is snuggling with my dog. Playing with the dog, says Janice. Yes, Central Park is a good year-round treat. Eating delicious chili. Yeah, it's great to eat. It's not so good to be in the house while it's being made. The other ones I have here are on my list. Colored pencils and a coloring book. I don't know if you guys ever play with that, but coloring is not something that I'm that into. Can't wait to complain to my husband about this. Like, next time I do a live, you're not making chili. It's cheap. It's fun. I'm not even a drawer myself. I'm not an artistic person, but sometimes if I've had a stressful day, it feels really good to just color inside the lines. Eating lunch outside. I love to take my lunch. I work from home. I love to take my lunch. Even if I have a busy day, I'll take my lunch and I'll sit out on the stoop of my house and have lunch outside. Looking at a photo album. Yeah, it's freaking cheap. It's nice. It's fun. It's a little break. It's a treat. Here's one. Having a wank. Having a wank. For those of you who don't know the word wank, it's British slang for masturbation or having sex with someone else or, I don't know, multiple people, right? Whatever level of expression of your sexuality feels like a pleasure to you, right? Because what I'm trying to do here is break down this sort of wall that we kind of have between the big concept of spiritual joy as being something that's like higher and evolved and somehow not of this world and somehow pure. The idea that that is something separate and different from the temporal ways that we experience joy in our bodies, in this body, in this moment, on this planet now. Right? So like sex, instead of being this sort of dark, hidden, sinful thing that's like you don't want to ever even talk about it, even in the way that I'm talking about it in a frank, not very explicit way, right? You never want to talk about it. It's dirty, it's sinful, it's something separate from like joy. When it's like, yeah, if you're giving yourself continual small treats and you're having a lousy day, one of the techniques or strategies that you might use taking a little break and having some me time, right? Ms. James is yelling. Not a wank. I knew you'd love that, Ms. That's probably TMI, but Ms. James once gifted me with a vibrator. So I know she's into it. Oh my God. Okay, yeah, Ms. is also saying, refood, when a woman cooks, it's duty. When a man cooks, it's art. And this is a quote from one of her favorite films, her favorite Indian films, English Vinglish. Oh my God, talk about treats. Okay, so those are some of the treats that are inexpensive and not associated with food, But let's move on to some more sinful treats. Although I guess the having a wank, that's, I guess, a sinful treat. Okay, let's be scandalous. Let's add some treats. Okay, so like what's a food treat? Chili's a food treat. Um, this is going to be a very sad food treat that I mentioned, but one of my treats that I give myself is a chocolate peanut butter kind bar. I'm going to give you a more interesting one than that. That's so sad, a freaking kind bar. Yeah. So what's a treat? When I really, really want a treat and I don't want to do anything for it. This was back before the pandemic. Now I have to make my own freaking whipped cream, but go to like the dessert bar at Whole Foods. Scandalous, sinful, gluttonous. Get a little bit of each thing. Sometimes I'll even do this thing where I'll scrape the top mascarpone cheese off of the tiramisu in the Whole Foods dessert bar, and I'll leave the rest of it there on the dessert bar. Yeah, that's it. I'm the one scraping the top layer of mascarpone off of the desserts at Whole Foods. Yeah, scandalous. That's a treat. Ice cream and French fries, potato chips. I'm yelling for chips. Chocolate. There's this chocolate bar that we've been having at my house. It's a brand called Tony Chocolonely, and it's this kind of like in between milk and dark kind of chocolate, and it has little bits of caramelized pretzel in there. That's a good treat. Yeah. Ms. says, hey man, don't diss a kind bar. Like what you like, even if it's healthy. No shaming for what you like. Absolutely. That's really what it's about, right? It's not that, like sometimes, and this is a really wacky feeling. This is an insight that I was only able to get to after probably 18 months of doing a practice of this thing that you may have heard of and may not have heard of called intuitive eating. 18 months into my practice of intuitive eating, I realized that my favorite food is salad. My favorite food is salad. But to get to that realization, it's not my favorite because I think it should be, okay? That's what's really important. To get to that insight that my favorite food is salad, I had to go through 18 months of allowing myself to binge eat whatever I wanted to. And I really mean whatever I wanted to. I ate a lot of mac and cheese. I ate a lot of foods that I never allowed myself to eat on the paleo diet, right? Mochi, says Ms. James. She loves mochi. Janine says she treats herself to chocolate peanut butter or sea salt caramel ice cream once a week. Yum, yum, yum. Janice is saying WTF. I don't know if she's saying that because I told her my favorite food was salad. But yeah, I had to let myself eat whatever I wanted. All these foods that I'd been craving for a long time, but not allowing myself to have. And then I allowed myself to eat those foods. And after I had been through this period of time of like eating whatever I wanted, the thing I realized is that I love eating salad. Now, my version of a salad is a pretty decadent thing. Feta cheese and sliced up nectarines and chicken and avocado and all kinds of things in there. But I really love a salad. I would not enjoy, say, the typical salad that diet culture tells us that we should want to eat, which is like, I don't know, romaine and big chunks of cucumber with of low-fat lemon vinaigrette on the side. Fuck that shit. No, I eat a lot. Like when I eat a salad, it is a meal and it's really tasty. That's my favorite thing to eat. And then after I eat that, I like to have, I don't know, I'd love to have a Twinkie. Twinkies are good. You know what I used to love is Ho-Hos. I haven't had a Ho-Ho in some time. I should go back to Ho-Hos and have some Ho-Hos. Yes, decadent salad. Yes, different favorite in different seasons, says Leslie. I love that, Leslie, and I would love to know what your favorite foods are depending on the season. That sounds so good. Yeah, Janine. Yummo, right? I love a really good salad. Okay, so that's food treats. I could tell you have a bunch of ideas about that. Now, I am a more bashful person, so I'm not going to talk about this in a really explicit way, but sex treats. We talked about it a little bit, yeah? You don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell me unless you want to. Okay, fine. If you feel like it, then share. I will not be sharing. Um, but yeah, like, what treats can you give yourself? What treats could you give yourself? How could you express your sexuality in a way that feels like a treat? Maybe there's something, maybe there's a type of media you never allow yourself to consume. Maybe there's a certain type of person you never allow yourself to find attractive. Maybe you've got some kind of unexplored baggage around masturbation. Maybe you are so tired all the time that you never allow, that you just never really find you're in the mood to like be with your partner. Yeah, everybody's still talking about food, which I get it, right? So there's all kinds of ways that sex can be a treat as well. Kelly comes out with any movie with Colin Firth. Yes, good times. How about the treat of this is a sort of more again a sinful or scandalous treat. How about the treat of taking more pride in yourself, right? The treat of thinking well of some particular part of yourself, whether it's a part of your body or related to your talents or your character, right? Dance, says Pam. Dance, such a great treat, right? You can put the music on and dance alone in your house. Yeah. Um, what if you thought about, what if you allowed yourself to brag? Like, what if you called up a good friend? Listen, write to me and tell, like, share your brags with me. I would love to hear them, right? Ms. James says, ask me about my Vic skin. I don't know what that is, but I'm guessing it's a sex toy. Oh, good times. What if you allowed yourself to really contemplate some part of your body that you think is beautiful? What if you told a friend or your partner how attractive you think it is or how much you love it? Like it doesn't have to be a sex thing, right? It can be maybe it's a part of your body that you're working on making peace with, right? Like a part of my body I'm always trying to make peace with is my upper arms. Yes, they're meaty and they're strong, and I have all kinds of baggage about them. And a couple of years ago, I was like, I'm sick of feeling this way. And I actually did this internal work about finding them attractive. Here, see the video camera's backwards. So I keep reading this one or this one. Okay, it's this one. Yeah, that way I can see it too. I did some work on actually finding it attractive. And so when I did my photo shoot for all the feels, I had the like one of the pictures that I had the lady take of me was me hanging from my arms from a tree. And that's a picture that normally I wouldn't have been that comfortable with, right? But I over time I indulged in the treat of thinking that that part of my body was attractive. Okay, so that's like the treat of pride. Yes, I like my hair and my knees, says Janice. Yeah, that's so sweet. Kelly says, I've just started teaching myself Italian because I am good at languages. Yes, that's like giving yourself the treat of thinking well of some part of your character or your mind, right? Saying to people, I'm good at languages, right? Let yourself freaking brag. A true friend will love it when you brag. Nothing makes me happier than when one of my friends is like, I'm really good at this. Oh my God, I get like all excited and tingly because it's my friend owning their skills. Okay, I love that. And then my last point here on the list of scandalous or sinful treats, although I really you could come up with a bunch of different ideas for this. Can you allow yourself to stretch out luxuriously into wanting something? Can you allow yourself to stretch out luxuriously into wanting something? Right? Like the next time you're jealous of somebody, and that feeling comes up for you, and it may be that as an adult that's not really a thing that happens that much for you, but maybe it does. But allow yourself to be envious, right? The thing is, jealousy and envy are signposts. They're telling you something about your desires, right? If you look at somebody's, maybe it's a situation where you're looking at somebody who's really successful in their career or in business, and you're like, I want what they have, right? I want to be as skillful as they are with that thing. That's telling you something about your longings. What if you're looking at somebody and you're like, I wish I had her thin upper arms? Yes, Michelle Obama. I wish I had her arms. When you're looking at that, that's telling you something about a part of yourself that you could choose to make a practice of being more loving to yourself about that part, right? I wish I had her hair. I wish I had her stomach. I wish I had her husband who makes chili, right? That's telling you something about what you want for yourself. Yeah, Ms. is saying I deeply envy people who have partners right now. Yeah, that is such a thing. I can't figure out who my heart goes out to more. My friends who have kids and are freaking stuck in the house with this overwhelming surplus of um, time with other people, or my friends who are single and who are in a situation where they're not getting any other people contact, right? It's a very tough thing. My mom, actually, who's a single lady who lives alone, she went out and she got a dog. Yeah. Kelly says it's okay to want the same thing. It doesn't mean we're taking it from someone else. It's a signal. Yes, I agree. It's a signal. Okay, so as usual, I thought this would last until 4:30, and it's almost 5 o'clock. As usual, this has lasted a lot longer, in part because you guys that tuned in today were so extremely fun. Yeah, so my friends who are commenting in the chat now who are unpartnered and want partners, or who either, not so much, I didn't mean to put it that way. My friends who are unpartnered and who are feeling the isolation of being alone during this quarantine season, you guys need treats. You got to treat yourselves. You got to find whatever it is that means for you. If you're going to ask more of yourself, and living alone during a pandemic is asking more of you, then you need to give more to yourself. So I don't know if you needed permission to say that. You certainly don't need permission to give more to yourself, but if it's helpful for you to have it, I'll give it to you. Treats, guys. Lots and lots of treats. Really, everybody on this call. I don't care what your circumstances are. If you're watching this, you need treats. Life asks so much of us, and right now it is asking more than ever before for a lot of us. We need treats. And if there's any type of inner blockage for you about allowing yourself to receive pleasure, right? Whether it's the 7 deadly sins or any type of mindset that's telling you that you do not deserve the pleasures of treats. You need to root that shit out. You need to confront that within yourself. Because the thing that is so cool is that if you make it a practice, if you really believe that it's okay for you to have treats and take pleasure, then you will begin to find little pockets of pleasure in places where you did not realize there was pleasure. You will be more proactive and more creative in the way that you actively seek out treats, and you will have a savoring of those. You will savor those treats in a deeper, more meaningful way, knowing that they are sustaining you at a very deep level. I'm just going to leave you with one last little story. When I was a kid, I had this one book that I loved to read. And it was a memoir by this guy named Richard Feynman, who was a nuclear physicist. And he worked on the bomb in the 40s. And he wrote this memoir called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, that was about, it was just a memoir of his life working on the bomb, and he was an extremely charismatic person. Later in life, I found out that he had cheated on his wife, and he had these aspects of his nature that were not that attractive. But in this memoir, he tells all of these great stories in an extremely engaging way, and I loved this book. And when I was about 11 years old, 11, 12, I read this book again and again and again. And it was a paperback, and I almost wore it out. And my parents, for some reason, even though I read tons of books all the time, I was a big reader, my parents, for some reason, decided that I was reading this book too much. And so, unbeknownst to me, they took it away from me. I didn't know where, it kind of was gone one day. I didn't realize they'd taken it. But they took the book and they held on to it until Christmas. And then they wrapped it and gave it to me for Christmas. And I received the book at Christmas time and I was like, what is this? What? Um, and in this weird way, even though this was the most like innocuous thing on earth that your 12-year-old daughter could be doing is rereading a memoir written by a scientist, I was weirdly ashamed of myself. I was weirdly ashamed that they had felt that I was, I don't know, indulging too much in this particular book. Believe me, there's nothing sinful about this book. And a few years ago, I ordered the book. I hadn't seen it or thought about it in years. A few years ago, I allowed myself to order the book and get the book again and read the book as much as I wanted. And it was still a great book. It aged well. It was fun. But it occurred to me that many of us have these secret little pockets of things that give us joy and shame about it in whatever form that takes. And so my invitation to you guys at the close of this Facebook Live is that my invitation to you is to start exploring your inner landscape, looking for those little pockets of joy and pleasure, looking for ways that you may have kind of sealed them off because of shame for some reason, and allowing yourself to become more attuned to feeling and living in those little pockets of pleasure. I'm not crying, I'm not moved. The chili peppers have finally overtaken me. I gotta like get off this live and like move. I have to move to Cleveland to get out of this house, to get away from these chili peppers. Oh my God. Okay. So I hope that was helpful. I so enjoyed this conversation with you. I love you guys. You are the best. Please have a wonderful day, a wonderful week. Look for treats. Treat yourself. You deserve it. Big love.